Well, hello, everybody. This is Paul Erickson with Management One, and I want to thank my good friends at Celerant to invite me to give this presentation at their 2022 Virtual Cumulus Conference. I'm very excited to talk about the psychology of price, the markup and markdown game. So let's get started. And of course, if you've been to seminars and webinars on retail, I will hazard a guess that you've never been to one where the first quote is from Leonardo da Vinci. Let's start there. But da Vinci said all our knowledge has its origin in our perceptions. And I think it's very, very true. As much back in the 15th century it was in the 21st century. That is true very much true for retail. So what is exactly psychological pricing? Well, it really is, it's a strategy that uses pricing that can influence spending or shopping habits of the consumer. It plays on the fact that consumers rarely know what something should cost. And that is actually true. And I found that in my personal life. Many years ago, I was flying back in Alaska. We had a client up there, and I was sitting next to a gentleman who worked in for the oil rigs in Alaska, and he was flying home as well. And he asked me what I did for a living, and I told him, and I said, I work with this store in the town. And he said, oh my gosh, their prices are so high. I would never buy anything in that store. They mark it up so much, and I said, well, actually, most of the goods that they sell are branded names, and they can't mark it up because of MAP pricing. So, and he was really like shocked by that, because again, it is all psychological when people look at our prices. And psychological pricing really is about it relies on simple changes that trick the brain. Now, a professor at Harvard, Gerald Saltman, has been talking about this for a long time. And one of the things that Gerald Saltman says is that 95% of consumer purchases are based not on our conscious mind, but on our subconscious mind. And our ability to tap into these subconscious behaviors and biases can actually make us more profitable, improve our margins, and make more money. I guess what it is, and to sum it up really, is that what we really think is largely hidden from us. In other words, most of what we know, we don't know, we know, if that makes any sense at all. Let's start out with Walmart. So we walk into a Walmart, and the first thing you see in many, many Walmart stores is soda machines. And they advertise 50 cents. Now, why do they do that? Because the first 10 seconds a customer comes into your store, they decide if your store is for them. And what Walmart wants to do on the subconscious mind is to say, look, our sodas are only 50 cents. Everything else in the store is going to be really, really a good bargain. And the other thing, too, about when the people come into your store, that first walk into your store is so incredibly important, because surveys have shown that 50% of your sales floor is never seen by many of your customers at all on their first visit. So let's get started with initial markup and how we price goods, finding the right price. What I'm going to contend is that we can improve our initial markup without any loss of business, without any tarnished image, and understanding that in many cases, much of the merchandise that you carry is fixed in terms of the retail price. There's really not much you can do with it. It's MAP pricing. It's easily found. It's very transparent online or in a competitor store. But there is a whole lot of merchandise in your store, if you really think about it, that you do have a longer runway in terms of markup. And on that merchandise, I often ask, when you have this longer runway, how do you come up with the retail price? And I get a variety of answers, and they're always quite interesting. They run the gamut from I double the cost and then I add $1, or to I take everything and I multiply the cost times 2.3 as an example. Or when asked why the item was ticketed at the specific price, they get defensive and they say, well, that's what I always price it at. And why are you asking me this? Well, a little bit more on that later in the presentation. But the point I'm trying to make is that these answers would truly lead anyone to the conclusion that most retailers truly can't explain what initial markup is meant to cover. You have to have enough initial markup to cover essentially 3 key elements in your store. One is, and I know very few stores that don't take markdowns, but what is the allowable amount of markdowns as a percent to your annual sales? And that number. Number 2 is, what's your overhead? Your payroll, your rent as a percent to sales. for the year. And then finally, at the end of the year, what is your desired net profit? All of these are expressed as a percent to annual sales. Once you have these three elements plugged in, there is a formula. And that formula is essentially markdown percentage plus operating expense percentage plus net profit goal percentage divided by 100% plus markdown percentage. Oh my God, what a formula. But let's put in some numbers in that formula and let's see what they look like. So let's just say, and this might be more of maybe a fashion boutique or a fashion shoe store, maybe a little more markdowns than maybe some of you are used to, but you plug in your own numbers. But let's say markdowns are 20% to sales. This is an allowable amount. We know we're going to take markdowns. This is our markdown allowance or budget. We also know that our operating costs, when it's all said and done, run about 40% to our revenue. And at the end of the year, our desired net profit is 6%. So based on those numbers, as you can see, we plug them into the formula, and we know that we need to get on our initial markup, at least 55% of the retail price needs to be markup. But what if we didn't do that? So let's look at a store that does $1 million in business, and let's say it was slashed in half. So you can see on the right, 55% is with the 20% markdowns is 46% MMU, which is maintained markup, which is a retail word. In accounting, it's very similar to gross profit. Less expenses is 40% equals your 6%. Again, that's where we want it to be. But if we only slash it by 2.5 points, what does that do to our net profit? Well, what's interesting is it cuts our gross profit by 3 and thus cuts our net profit by 3. The point is that 2.5 point difference in IMU results in a 3-point swing in net profitability. Now, the key there is what I'm about to talk about is these little tricks of the trade, where if you can get a little bit more markup, every dollar, every shekel, every euro, every yen, every peso, that you can increase your IMU by being a little bit clever and understanding psychological pricing, is a direct elevator down to your bottom line. So it is important, and it can make a big difference. Now let's look at this again. What's 52.5%? Well, the store that was at 52.5% would have priced a $9 item at $19. The store that was 55% would have taken that $9 item and marked it $19.99, or essentially $20. But is $19.99 really $20? Well, this is the age-old issue of charm pricing, ending prices with the number 9. And I wanted to start, there's no other place to start a presentation on psychological pricing than with charm pricing, because it's the oldest and it's the most heavily taught and most heavily used pricing method in the retail book. Now, what it really does psychologically is tricks the consumer's brain into thinking something costs less. In other words, $200, $199.99 is not $200. Well, it is, but it's not. But does this really work? Are people that naive? Are people that ignorant that they don't understand that when they see $199.99, they're not looking at a $200 price point? Well, the answer is yes. Prices ending in 9 were so effective, they even outsold lower prices for the exact same product. This was done in the Journal of Quantitative Economics. This was very, very interesting. They took an item that was $60, original price, same item, $60, priced at $45. They took the same item, $60, priced at $49. And the $49 sale price outsold the $45 price, even though it was more expensive. That's the power of charm pricing. Now, the other thing that I think we need to understand is we need to keep prices stupidly simple. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this is done in the Journal of Consumer Psychology. This may seem really silly, but the research has said that the top 2 prices seem far higher to consumers in the example I'm showing you than the bottom price. Now, this effect occurs because the way one would express the number verbally. In other words, the top number, 1,499. Without the comma and without the decimal point, it would be expressed 1499. That's for the unpunctuated version. Now, what's interesting is that they've discovered through studies that the number is evaluated the same whether it's spoken out loud or it's done internally. Now, we see other things like that too. If you go to a really good restaurant look at the wine list or maybe the lunch menu or the dinner menu, many times they won't even have a decimal point. They won't even have a dollar sign. Because ditching the cents, putting a decimal point on there, makes people feel they're spending less money. $12 feels cheaper than $12.00 because the number itself isn't as long. And the dollar sign itself can trigger purchasers into feeling the pain of paying. So what are the best route in this case? Remove the dollar sign and cents altogether. Now, we also know that if you give a consumer too many options, that can be debilitating for them, certainly demotivating for them. And there was a study, many studies done. There was a book written by Barry Schwartz quite a few years ago, about 20 years ago, on the paradox of choice, which was a psychology book, which essentially says if you give people too many things to choose from, they're unlikely to be able to choose. A more recent study from Columbia University is so they set up at a farmer's market in California for an entire summer, and they set up a booth with samples of jam. They're actually a Wilkin & Son jams from the UK. And every 2 hours, they switched from offering 24 flavors on the table. And then 2 hours later, they'd put 6 different flavors on the table. And they did this very scientifically, of course. So there was this equal amount of time and all of that. Well, on the average, when people stopped by the table, they tasted 2. That was the average. Didn't matter how many were out there. And interestingly enough, when there were 24 to pick from, 60% of the people that stopped when there were 24. Only 40% stopped when there were 6. But here's the key. 30% who sampled from the smaller assortment, the assortment of only 6, bought something, while only 3%, when they were confronted with 24 different flavors to pick from, bought. So the presence of choice, I think, may be appealing in theory, but more choice actually tends to be debilitating for the consumer. And another research from Yale offered a different take on a little bit like this. So they put, if 2 similar items are priced the same, consumers are less likely to buy one than if their prices are slightly different. And they used the gum experiment where they took 2 packs of gum and each were priced at 63 cents. And then they took the same 2 packs of gum and priced one at 62 and one at 64. When they were both priced the same, they had a 46% sales. 46% the stop chose a pack of gum. When they had different prices, it rose to 77%. Now, talk about reducing the pain of paying. Nobody likes to pay for stuff. Let's start there. I mean, the pain of paying is something that if we can reduce that idea of we're paying for something, the better off we're going to be. Now, I think Uber is a really good example of this because it revolutionized the taxi industry, as we all know. The old traditional taxi rides, the pain of payment was really high. You see the meter increasing each minute, which is evoking an ongoing, increasingly painful sensation. And plus, at the end of the ride, up until 10, 15 years ago, you had to pay by cash. You couldn't even use a credit card. Now, Uber was different. There is no visual meter. There is no physical payment. Uber, you get in the Uber and you get out of the Uber. They bill to your credit card. It reduces the pain of paying. I think another similar thing on that is, why do you have chips at a casino? Well, by creating a separate medium between your customer's money and their payment, it distorts the perception of paying there too. I mean, they know they're paying, but these are funny colored chips and it doesn't always feel that way. That's what casino chips and gift cards have in common. Also, what my dry cleaner did here in Minneapolis, where I live, is when I first started going to them, they said, look, why do you want to keep paying us every time you pick up? You're a busy man. Just drop it off, pick it up. Give us your credit card. We'll auto bill the credit card. And if you do that, we'll knock 5% off your purchases, which is like a no-brainer for me. But I'm quite sure maybe I use the dry cleaners more because I'm not experiencing, again, that pain of paying. We also know that what is scarce becomes very attractive psychologically. And that is very, very true. I'm going to show you some examples of this. Product sameness has turned a lot of merchandise in stores into commodities. And if you're selling commodities, you have very little control over prices. The laws of supply and demand do. So scarcity only works if you have certainly unique items that people necessarily can't get anywhere else. Now you see the scarcity principle all the time. When our options are scarce, what is available becomes more attractive. We only have one left in the warehouse. Someone else expressed interest in this house earlier today. Call now, available only while supplies last, and only 3 left at this price. These are all examples of scarcity, artificial time constraints. If you miss the chance to buy this thing now, you'll never see it again. It creates a sense of urgency and encourages your customers to make purchases quickly or impulsive purchases, which is good for us, the retailer. A single day events, sales that end within a few hours encourage customers, obviously, to make purchases quickly. And it does, even if it's not necessarily true. The trick is to make your customer believe the ending is impending so they make a purchase. Now, in the same vein, and proof that Australians have far too much free time on their hands, they did, researchers in Australia aimed to test the hypotheses that all the girls get prettier at closing time. Now, they found really good support for this theory. It was true. Perceived attractiveness of members of the opposite sex actually increased around the time the bars closed. But what they didn't expect is that was true even when the researchers polled participants who had not been drinking alcohol at all. Now, based on these results, we call it the beer goggle effect. The beer goggle effect is not actually about beer. It's about something else entirely. It's scarcity. When there's less things to pick from, they look more attractive. By the way, did you know that what you tell people, they actually believe? This is the beautiful thing about retail. If you tell them something, the consumer actually will believe it. How is the consumer supposed to know if a $19 for a t-shirt is a lot of money or very low or very little? Interestingly enough, telling people they will believe you. Simply putting only or low price or from as low as next to the $19 actually usually does the trick. It says this price is low, must be. Again, it goes even further than that though. And this is interesting. Words that are written next to the price, even unrelated to the price itself, hint the buyer of the magnitude of price. Now, there was a study done a few years ago that had participants shown them descriptions of an inline skate. Now, the first description emphasized that skates were low friction. That was a great benefit. And the other emphasized high performance as a great benefit. Now, the participants rated both of those benefits as equally important to them. So not one benefit was better than the other, but liked the price more, same price, but liked the same price on both of them, liked the price more when the description said low friction. The other thing to do when you're comparing price in signage or in anything else, make sure the low prices are on the left and the high prices are on the right. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, it's basically spatial and how we look at things from a spatial perspective. We were learned to count when we were little kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When you think about it in your mind, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're counting left to right. That's how we learn. Small numbers on the left, higher numbers on the right. And when you mix the two up, it becomes confusing. And if you don't think spatial, a spatial factor is something that's a big thing in psychology, just think of the things up and down. Forget left and right, up and down. So, the righteous go up to heaven, but, the sinners go down to hell. We love good movies, so we rate them thumbs up, and bad movies, yuck, is thumbs down. And marijuana gets you high, but after that, the euphoria, you come down. And men, oh my God, how we process ads. We are such superficial people. Men process ads in signage way less in depth than women do. And we use price color, specifically red, to perceive if it's a good deal or not. The color red becomes the focal point of attention. And how we evaluate our purchases and how we associate red prices in red with savings. Now, also some things can be, little things can be big. And this is also something that I think you can really add to your bottom line if you understand this. So let me use an extreme example, but it works. I fly a lot on Delta Airlines, and I was one year at the end of the year, 5-6 years ago, if I recall, I was going through my receipts on Delta for tax time, and I noticed something that I never noticed when I bought the ticket. And that was all of the ticket prices ended in 20 cents. Every single one. If it was $355 ticket, it was $355 and 20 cents. If it was a $582 ticket, it was $582 and 20 cents. 20 cents in every one. I didn't even know I was paying it. And I would hazard to guess that not one human being on planet Earth that bought a ticket on Delta Airlines that year didn't stop buying when they said, well, I was going to pay for it, but that 20 cents. So they lost no business. But how much did they make? Well, I looked up how many tickets they sold that year. It was 150 million. 150 million times 20 cents is $30 million that they put on their bottom line with no tarnished image, no loss of business. In fact, the customer like me didn't even know about it. So always think about how cents and adding maybe 50 cents on certain things, on impulse items, little things like that. The customer doesn't see it, but you'll see it on your bottom line at the end of the year. Now, I often like to talk about cost-based pricing and the gravitational pull of cost-based pricing. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you go to a trade show and you sit down in a booth and it's a new vendor you've never worked before, but you've heard some good things about, and he shows you a tchotchke, some little impulse item you'd have near the checkout counter, and you really like it. And it's really, it's something you go, we could sell these. So we like this. So the next thing we do is we ask the salesman how much it is. And that's where we go wrong, because once we know the cost, that influences our retail price. So what we should do is, instead of knowing the cost, let's determine what we could sell it at and see, and first, because that's the intrinsic value of the item, not the cost price, the retail price. Remember, the consumer has no idea what you paid for it. So let's say we sat down and was looking at something and we think we can sell this, and we're going to market $39. And then my partner says, well, Paul, if we're going to market 39, let's put 50 cents on it. It's not, let's just add a little bit because they'll add up. Remember the Delta Airlines example. So I go, okay, we're going to price it $39.50. We ask what the cost is. He says it's $9. If we knew it was $9, there's a very good chance we wouldn't have priced it $39.50. There's a very good chance we priced it $29.50. Because we let the gravitational pull of the cost price bring it down to a price that we could have sold it at a higher price. I love to tell the story about people being lazy about markup too. The story is that I gave this very similar presentation in Florida quite a few years ago. At the end of it, my sponsors took me to lunch. On the way back, we walked by a high-end luxury men's apparel store. The owner happened to be by the window of the front door. He saw me coming and he walked out and he said, Paul, I've already instituted your pricing. And I go, already? It's been 45 minutes. He said, well, I got back to the store and Larry, who's my tie buyer, was unpacking a new shipment of Robert Talbot ties. And so I looked at the price and they were all priced $115. So I asked Larry, I go, well, I'm starting to think about this a little bit more. Can't we price this a little higher? I mean, why do you price it $115? And of course, Larry said, well, I don't know. This is what I've always priced it at. He goes, well, why don't we price it $119.50? Let's change the prices. And let's think about how we sell ties. First of all, most of our customers don't even look at the price because they're wealthy people. They buy a suit, it's $2,000-$3,000 suit, $300-$400 dress shirt. They don't even look at the price of the tie. So that's number one. Number two is, even if they did, are they not going to pay $119.50 but pay $115? Really? So we're leaving money on the table. So he goes, how many Robert Talbot ties I sell in a year? About 1,000. So that was $4,900 you've already made me this morning. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. And he goes, this is the addendum of the story. And he goes, I was curious because we're not the only store in the area that sells this line. Nordstrom does. So I took Larry out to Nordstrom and we went out and looked at their furnishings area. And there were all the Robert Talbot ties. Guess what they're priced at? $129. They've been leaving money on the table. They just don't think about it. They price it like we always do. Don't do that. Don't be lazy. There's places you can get more markup in your store if you just look and think it through. Now, another thing about psychology is we bring in new merchandise, we need to tell the customer it's new merchandise. That is why when you walk into really good retailers, you will see some signage that say just arrived. Now, why would that be a big deal? Because when the consumer is exposed to something new and something novel, let's say, it increases how much dopamine, which is a chemical that is released in our brain. It increases that, and dopamine is what we would call a feel-good neurotransmitter. It's released when we eat dessert or food we crave, pizza, or even while we're having sex. So this is why people will literally sit outside and camp outside an Apple store waiting to buy the new product that's being released that's only minimally different than the ones they already have. It's the power of new. Always keep your displays fresh and exciting, and add new products every month and tell them they're new. Now, people like free stuff, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this too in a little bit. But the reciprocity principle is really kind of interesting. Ever go to a grocery store and have a really sweet great grandmother looking woman or grandmother looking woman pushing this drug of free cheese at you? I mean, if you go and try some, you probably, after that, you probably feel a little obligated, don't you? I know I do. After all, they gave you something for free. So shouldn't you give something back to them? That's how kind of people think, right? Well, that's the principle of reciprocity in action. And there have been studies and studies about that. You know, there's actually one study by a guy named Robert Cialdini, and he put people in a room, and had some people bring other people, these are all strangers, a free can of soda. Just get them because, would you like some soda? Give them a free can of soda. That's it. Big deal. No big deal. But what they found is that they rated those people much more likable when all they've done is give them a can of soda. That's it. So one can wins the favor of complete strangers. So this is something also that I think is important in retail. Don't be afraid of free. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Okay, let's get to markdowns. We talked about markup. Let's talk about markdowns. Unfortunately, they are a way of life in retail, and they can destroy a store's image. They can destroy a store's profitability. And so we need to understand markdowns better. And the first thing I want to talk about is that it's not always the lowest price that wins the sale. So what do I mean? Well, I'm really talking about money is good. Getting back again to money is good and spending it is bad, is painful. So hence the way we frame a sale when we put something on sale is really important. If you frame the sale around the word save versus how much you're spending, well, save makes customers see how much they've saved, and that's a positive. And that's why you see like grocery stores and other stores that on their receipts, many times you'll see at the bottom, they'll print a reminder by saying you saved X amount of dollars by shopping with us today. Now, one other thing about markdowns and the psychology of percentage off, which is I hate. You don't see, for example, 20% off Diet Coke. You don't see 15% off Colgate toothpaste. Ever wonder why? Well, there's a good reason why the packaged good industry doesn't like percentage off incentives, while the rest of the retail world has gone percentage off crazy. Well, the first drawback is on percentage off is you're asking your customer to do a mathematical calculation. And even in the best of times, the average consumer is, let's say, somewhat math challenged. Number two, second drawback is that the percentage off is dangerous for you because you are helping the consumer develop an immunity or an addiction to percentage off. It takes a higher and higher percentage to get them to act. It's like your body building tolerance to alcohol over time. The longer you drink, the more it takes you to get you intoxicated. That's why 20% off rarely works for a retailer today. It's deemed worthless unless it's applied to a product that's, rarely discounted, like say alcohol. What consumers like? Coupons. A coupon. Consumers are more likely to respond in a coupon to a known amount. A $25 coupon has more motivation than a 25% off coupon because it's easier to grasp. And easy is what the consumer is looking for. Make it simple for me is the new hook. Now, there was a recent online study tested the effectiveness of various email offers. And one study, and I think you're going to know the answer to this when I tell you, but I think it's important. They chose $50 off a widget, and that got to still a reasonably good maintained markup sufficient margin. And that same widget, they said 15% off, and that 15% off got to the same price. That makes sense. $50 off and 15% off got to the same retail price. So which one do you think was better? Well, I think you guys already know, because you guys are consumers too. $50 off the coupon had a 72% higher conversion rate and generated 170% more revenue than 15% off. Now, what's also interesting about coupons, and this was weird, but I actually believe this is true. This was a study done by a guy named Paul Zak, who's a professor in neuroeconomics at Claremont Graduate School. And what he tested was how coupons, getting something in the mail that's personalized to you, a coupon can affect people's happiness and his health and their stress. You know, he registered coupon recipients experienced a 38% rise in oxytocin, similar to dopamine, and were 11% happier. Respiration rates dropped, heart rates decreased, sweat levels were lower. They felt more relaxed. They felt less stress. You know, today customers almost demand deals, but we still find some delight and joy in what appears for us to be an exclusive offer in a coupon. Now, one of the things that Apple did in the UK that I thought was absolutely brilliant when I was in London a few years ago is that on Black Friday, instead of having a sale, they said anything you buy, if you buy anything in the Apple Store on Black Friday, you will get a gift voucher of 120 pounds. Whatever you bought, you'll get a gift voucher that has to be redeemed not that day, but they bring them back into the store at a later time. So they made their initial purchases at full retail, full price, but they gave them an incentive to return at another date. A really, really good idea. Now, there are rules in life and there's rules in markdowns. Number one, we should plan them. Number two, we should have a budget for them, and you need to know how many you can take. And by the way, if you have a budget, don't be under, not over. Don't be under. I'd rather have you err to get rid of it more quickly, even if you priced it too low. Get it off the floor so that the customers won't see it. Sell it immediately. Don't think about profits. Think about cash flow. Try to use price points and not percentages. And by the way, markdowns is a learning environment. Learn from your markdowns. Every markdown you take, why did you have to take the markdown? What was it about that item that didn't sell so you won't make this mistake again? It's sort of like tuition on the education of your customers. Pay your tuition. And then there are these markdown truths. And the first one is, when you take a markdown, tell your customer why you took the markdown. Because if you don't, you run the risk of having every interaction with the customer be like a mini bazaar. Like, you know, Bill, that rack's on sale, but when is that rack going to go on sale? Because you never gave me a reason why it was on sale. You just said it was sale. End of season, weekend special, special buy, whatever it is, come up, you can make it up, but give them a reason why the items are marked down. By the way, if you have a problem with markdowns or carryover merchandise, which is worse, well, that's because you buy too much. The number one cause of excessive markdowns and slow turn is we overbuy. We buy more than what we can actually digest as a store. And the old adage that markdowns, your first markdown is the cheapest, is true, but not the way people think. People think the first markdown is the cheapest. You take a small markdown if you can recognize it quickly. Waiting to the end of the season means you have to take a larger markdown. The reality is your first markdown is the cheapest if it works, because it certainly isn't the cheapest if you are nickel and diming and kind of slightly marking it down. That $120 item that you mark 99 is probably not going to sell 99 as if it didn't sell at 120. You have to find the price that will get it out within a week. That will do many things for you. It'll help your cash flow. Number two, you won't have a store full of markdown merchandise on the floor because you're marking it to sell immediately. Most of your customers won't even know it was there to begin with. So your first markdown is the cheapest, but that's because you took it out in the back alley and shot it in the head and got rid of it right away. Now, the price you paid has nothing to do with markdown price. I don't think I have to say anything more than that. The price you paid for it, the old days where I have many, many years ago, old timey retailers go, well, Paul, I can't sell it less than $50. That's what I paid for it. Well, that is completely irrelevant. Again, as I said, tuition on the education of your customer. Learn from every markdown. Emphasize the amount of saving rather than necessarily the price itself. And when you're not on sale and you do have some sale merchandise, keep them in the back of the store. Make your customers walk through all and see all the full price new merchandise that just arrived before they get to the sale area. And the last thing is, can you name a retail vertical that never discounts? Well, I ask audiences that, and the women usually get it because it's cosmetics. Cosmetics don't discount. You know what they do? Give away free stuff. Free. Now I'm back to the power of free. Over time, a retailer's perceived generosity makes you more likable to your customer and leads to a very positive brand association. Now, right or wrong, shoppers believe they get a better deal when they walk away with something for free instead of spending less. And they massively overreact to free products, free shipping, free breakfast, free hand lotion. In fact, researchers sold 73% more hand lotion when it was offered in a bonus pack that was free than when it carried an equivalent discount. So don't underestimate this power. Now, how would I use this? Well, let me tell you once. I have many stories on this, but I'm going to tell you my favorite story. I was in Wisconsin quite a few years ago, probably 15 years ago. It's been quite a while now. It's about this time of the year too, October. And we were at a client's shoe store. And after our meeting, the owner of the store said, Paul, looks like you need some new shoes. I'm going to have Morty. And I knew I was going to have to buy some shoes. So Morty, the number one salesperson, takes me out, and man, he was a good salesman. And I ended up buying two pair of shoes, both full price. They were $600 total. And one was a nice pair of suede shoes. Now it's October. And when Morty was ringing me up, he said, Paul, do you have spray for this? Because the weather's going to start changing and it's going to get messy and you want to protect these shoes. So I'm thinking, do I have spray at home or do I not? Probably, I don't know. Well, sell me. It's an $8 can of spray. They paid $2. What a great salesman. Then as he's taking the shoes out, he goes, here's what I'm going to do. He's putting these insoles in. And he says, this is like walking on air. These insoles are amazing. Trust me on this. You are going to love them. These are going to make your shoes so much more comfortable. And he's putting them in there. I didn't even ask to do it. He didn't even ask if I could. He just did it. I mean, this guy, you talk about a salesman. My God. So as he rings me out, I look at the bill and there was no bill for the insoles. There was no bill for the spray. It was just the two pair of shoes for $600. And I said, Morty, you forgot to put the spray and the insoles on the bill. And he looked at me and he said, why would I do that? You just bought $600 worth of merchandise at full price from me. That's on the house. That's a thank you. Well, you think that had an impact on me? You think little things like that will have an impact on your customer? Do you think that'll have a bigger impact on a customer than just selling a $8 spray can or a $6 insole? You bet it will. You bet it will. And you know how I know it? Because that happened 15 to 20 years ago, and I'm still talking about it today. So I want to thank everybody. It's been a pleasure. I want to thank all my good friends at Celerant at the virtual conference, the Cumulus virtual conference. And I will offer this. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, it's very important. It's not to wing it anymore with inventory, not only with margins, but with how much you carry, how much you're buying, your open to buy procedures, your budgeting, what's the true growth potential of your business, how do you stack up with benchmarks of other stores in your industry. Love to chat with you about it. It's not a sales call. It's just a really nice, good, positive chat. And hopefully I can give you a few ideas that can help you going forward. So just email me at paul@management-1.com, and I would love to meet you. And I want to thank everybody again at Celerant, and have a great show.